All right, so get ready, because today we're going to be exploring something pretty fascinating, I think.
Okay.
It's all about how different generations and genders think about mental health challenges and like if they're part of someone's identity or not.
It's fascinating. That's exactly what we're diving into today.
It is a big change.
Yeah.
For a long time, mental health was taboo,
Right.
something you just didn't talk about openly.
Right.
And now it's almost like we've swung to the other side where it's embraced, even celebrated in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to unpack this whole trend using data from the 2024 presidential elections study.
Okay.
They asked people if they agreed with the statement, mental health challenges are an important part of my identity. And the results are pretty eye-opening, to say the least.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Are you ready to dive in?
Yeah, let's do it.
Data on the screen, numbers come alive. Male, female flows where the patterns thrive. Visual charts, public colors unify. Gender decoded, bringing truth to light. Small drum fill. We break it down, real talk. Trends unveiling, facts from every block. Here's your insight, watch the data glide. Gender decoded, let the beats collide.
Can you give us some context on how we even got here? Like, how did we go from mental health being totally hushed up to being so openly discussed?
Well, for older generations, like the boomers, mental health was something you just didn't talk about, period.
Right.
It was seen as a weakness, something to be ashamed of. There was a lot of stigma around it. And seeking help was often seen as a last resort.
Right, yeah. It was all about keeping up appearances.
Exactly.
Think about those old movies where someone's like having a breakdown
Yeah.
and it's this big dramatic secret. Now you see people talking about their anxiety and depression on social media. It's a huge change.
Huge change, exactly. And there are a few key factors that contributed to this shift. One is advocacy and awareness campaigns. Organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.
Right.
They've been super important in raising awareness and reducing stigma. And then there's the impact of research. As scientists learn more about the brain,
Yeah.
and how it works, we're starting to understand mental health conditions in a much more nuanced way. This has helped to debunk a lot of the myths and the misconceptions that used to surround these issues.
And then there's social media, too.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a double-edged sword in a lot of ways, but it's definitely played a role in kind of normalizing conversations about mental health. People are sharing their stories, connecting with others who, understand what they're going through and finding support online. It's created a whole new landscape for, mental health discourse.
It has. It absolutely has. And this brings us to the generational divide that this survey shows. We have data for boomers, Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z. And the differences are pretty striking.
Lay it on me.
Okay, well, first, let's just set the stage, right? So basically what we're seeing is this trend where each younger generation is more likely to say that mental health challenges are an important part of my identity.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it really reflects how much the whole conversation around mental health has changed over time, right?
Yeah.
Like older generations, they often face so much stigma and silence around these issues. But younger people have grown up with more open dialogue and more resources, too.
Exactly. It's become way more normalized.
Yeah.
So let's get into some of the specifics, because this is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah, okay.
So we're talking about boomer men. Only 27% of them agreed with that statement, that mental health challenges are an important part of my identity.
Okay.
But then you look at Gen Z women, and that number jumps to 72%.
Wow.
I know that's a 45 percentage point jump.
It is huge.
Right, it's a huge shift. Like, things have really changed.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how much things have evolved, and it really shows that for a lot of younger people, mental health isn't something to be ashamed of anymore.
Yeah.
It's actually part of who they are.
It's like it's become part of their identity, like you said.
Exactly.
And speaking of identity, remember that millennial curveball I mentioned?
Oh, yeah. What was that about?
Okay, so this is interesting. Millennial men were actually slightly more likely than millennial women to agree that mental health is a key part of their identity.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a small difference, but it kind of goes against what we're seeing in every other generation.
That's fascinating. It's like a little anomaly,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it really makes you think, like, what was so different about the experiences of millennial men that could have led to this?
Well, I mean, this is the generation that basically grew up with the internet and social media, right?
That's true.
So maybe all that constant connection of the online communities,
Yeah.
being able to find other people who share their experiences, maybe that had some kind of impact.
Yeah, that's a really interesting theory. Like, maybe the internet gave them this space to express themselves and connect with others in a way that they couldn't offline.
Right. And maybe instead of feeling pressured to be like the stereotypical tough guy,
Yeah.
they found other guys who were open about their mental health.
Mhm.
And that made them feel more comfortable talking about it too.
Yeah, and that could have definitely made them more likely to see it as part of their identity.
Exactly. It's like the internet provided this platform for them to challenge those traditional ideas of masculinity and be more vulnerable.
Right, and it shows the power of online spaces to change social norms, especially around these topics that used to be so taboo.
Totally. It's like a whole new world for talking about these things.
Yeah, and this generational difference, I think, really raises some big questions about, like, the overall picture of mental health.
Okay, so thinking more broadly, like, what does this all mean?
Well, to me, it's just a pretty major shift in how we as a society think about and understand mental health.
Okay.
We're moving away from seeing it as something separate, something to be fixed or hidden, and instead we're starting to see it as part of the whole human experience.
That's a huge shift.
It is, and it has major implications, especially when we consider mental health care, education, and even policy.
So it's not just about providing resources. It's also about understanding how different people view mental health and making sure those resources are actually effective and relevant to them.
Exactly. We need to consider the unique needs and experiences of different generations and genders and come up with strategies that actually work for them.
So basically a one-size-fits-all approach just isn't going to cut it.
No, not at all.
And this is especially important as mental health becomes a bigger part of how people define themselves.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to another really important aspect of all of this, the whole gender dynamic.
Right, because the study shows that in almost every generation, women are more likely to see mental health as part of their identity.
Yeah, except, of course, for those millennial men.
Right, those guys are keeping us on our toes.
They are, but it makes you wonder, why is there this difference between men and women?
Yeah, what's going on there?
Well, there are a lot of factors at play, but let's dig into some of the possible explanations.
Okay, let's do it.
All right, so historically, women haven't faced as many taboos around talking about their emotions or seeking help for mental health issues.
So you're saying it's been more socially acceptable for women to be open about this stuff.
Right, and that could be a big reason why they're more likely to integrate it into their identities.
That makes sense. But then wouldn't that also mean that men have faced more pressure to keep their struggles hidden?
Exactly. That pressure to conform to traditional masculinity can make it really hard to seek help or even admit to yourself that you're struggling.
And it seems like those old school ideas of what it means to be a man are being challenged more and more these days, especially by younger generations.
Absolutely. We're seeing a shift towards embracing vulnerability and emotional intelligence. And that's not just for women, it's for everyone.
And there's also been a rise in online communities and forums specifically for men's mental health.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's like there's this growing awareness that men struggle too, and it's okay to talk about it. And I wonder if that's part of what we saw with those millennial men in the study. Maybe they had more spaces to connect and share their experiences, and that made them more comfortable incorporating mental health into their sense of self.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And it's important to remember that increased openness around mental health might also be changing how we see gender roles in general.
So it's like we're breaking down those old boxes and recognizing that mental health is a human experience, not just a male or female thing.
Exactly. And that's a huge step towards creating a more inclusive and supportive environment for everyone.
I totally agree with that. And it seems like the data also shows that online communities have played a big role, especially for women.
Oh, yeah, those online forums and support groups, they can be incredibly influential.
Yeah, I mean, think about all those groups for things like postpartum depression or anxiety.
Right.
Women are connecting with other women who really understand what they're going through, and that can be so powerful.
It is. It's like finding your tribe, your community of people who get it.
Right, and in those spaces, they can be themselves completely, mental health challenges and all.
Exactly, and those connections can be so transformative. They can help women reframe their experiences, challenge those negative thoughts, and ultimately integrate their mental health into their sense of self in a more positive way.
So it's not just about information and resources, it's also about that sense of belonging and acceptance.
Absolutely. That's crucial for anyone who's struggling.
But what about those bigger social movements that have become so prominent lately? Things like #MeToo, body positivity, and the push for mental health awareness in general.
Those movements have been huge in creating a space for more open and honest conversations about women's experiences.
Yeah, including their mental health.
Right. They've challenged societal norms and empowered women to speak up and advocate for their needs.
It's like one conversation leads to another, and mental health becomes this central theme.
Yeah, it normalizes the conversation, reduces stigma, and helps women see their experiences as part of a larger shared narrative.
Not something to be ashamed of.
Exactly. But as we delve deeper into these generational and gender differences, we have to remember that everyone's experience is unique.
Right. We can't just put everyone into neat little categories based on their generation or gender.
No, we need to be mindful of those individual journeys and recognize that how people integrate mental health into their identities will vary widely.
So instead of making assumptions, we need to approach these conversations with curiosity and empathy and a willingness to learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that leads us to the final and perhaps most thought-provoking question we want to explore today.
Okay, hit me with it. I'm ready.
So imagine this. We've gone from mental health being this taboo topic to something that younger generations are incorporating into their identities.
Right.
But as that stigma continues to fade and access to resources improves, what happens next?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, how will future generations integrate these experiences into their sense of self?
Right. And what new trends and shifts might we see?
That is something to think about.
It is. It's a really complex question, but some things immediately come to mind. Like, historically, women haven't faced as many taboos around, discussing their emotions or even seeking help
Right.
for mental health stuff.
So you're saying like those societal norms about expressing your emotions could be playing a role in how women see mental health as part of who they are.
Yeah, exactly. And,
Interesting.
it also makes you think about the flip side, like how men have probably felt a lot more pressure to suppress their emotions and hide those struggles.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like that whole be a man stereotype could definitely make it harder for guys to open up about mental health stuff.
Absolutely. It creates a huge barrier.
But it seems like those ideas of what it means to be a man are starting to change, like especially with the younger generations.
You're right. We're definitely seeing a shift towards embracing vulnerability and emotional intelligence as positive things.
And not just for women.
Right. It's for everyone.
And we've also seen this rise in online communities and forums that are specifically for men's mental health.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Those are becoming more and more common.
So it's like there's more awareness now that men struggle too, and it's okay to talk about it.
Right.
And maybe that explains what we saw with the millennial men in the study. Maybe they just had more places where they felt comfortable sharing their experiences, and that helped them see mental health as part of who they are.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. And I think this increased openness about mental health could also be changing how we view gender roles in general.
It's like we're finally starting to break free from those old stereotypes and recognize that mental health is a human thing,
Exactly. It's not about being male or female.
It's about being human.
Right. And that's so important for creating a more supportive and inclusive environment for everyone.
Totally. And speaking of support, the study also found that online communities have been really influential, especially for women.
Oh, yeah. Those online forums and support groups can be amazing.
Like think about all groups for postpartum depression or anxiety or,
Right.
just general mental health support. Women can connect with other women who truly get it. And that's so powerful.
It really is. It's like they're finding their tribe.
Yeah.
People who understand what they're going through.
And in those spaces, they can truly be themselves.
Yeah. Mental health challenges and all.
Exactly. And those connections can be so powerful.
Yeah.
They can help women see their experiences in a new light, challenge those negative thoughts, and really integrate their mental health into their sense of self in a more positive way.
That's so true.
So it's not just about getting information. It's about finding a sense of belonging and acceptance.
And that's so important.
But what about those bigger movements we've seen lately, like #MeToo, body positivity, and the whole push for mental health awareness?
Yeah, those have been huge.
They've created a space for these conversations about women's experiences.
Right, and that includes their mental health.
It's like they've challenged those old societal norms and empowered women to advocate for themselves.
Exactly.
And it's like a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
One conversation leads to another, and mental health becomes this central theme.
And that's a good thing because it helps to normalize the conversation, reduce stigma, and make women feel like their experiences are part of a larger shared narrative.
So it's not something to be ashamed of.
Exactly. But as we keep talking about these differences between generations and genders, we have to remember that everyone's experience is unique.
Yeah, you can't just lump everyone into these neat little categories based on their age or gender.
Right. We need to recognize that everyone's journey with mental health is different.
So instead of making assumptions, we should approach these conversations with curiosity and empathy and a willingness to learn from each other.
Absolutely. And that actually brings us to the last question we want to explore today, and it's a pretty big one.
Okay, I'm right. Lay it on me.
So we've seen mental health go from this hush-hush topic to something that younger generations are openly incorporating into their identities.
Yeah.
But as the stigma keeps fading and resources become more accessible, what do you think will happen next?
That's a good question. Like, how will future generations think about mental health and incorporate those experiences into their sense of self?
Exactly. And what new trends or shifts might we see?
It's definitely something to ponder.
Yeah, it really is a lot to think about. Like, will there come a point where mental health is so normal that it's not even like a defining part of someone's identity anymore?
Yeah. Or will it become like even more intertwined with how people see themselves?
Right. Like, it could go either way.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, talking about mental health is becoming way more common, especially online.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, could we reach a point where it's just so integrated into our lives that we don't even think of it as this separate thing?
I think that's definitely possible. Like, as more people learn about mental health and resources become more accessible, I think we'll start to see a more holistic view of well-being, where mental health is just part of the picture.
Yeah, like along with physical health and emotional
That's
health.
exactly.
So instead of thinking of it as this issue to be solved, it just becomes part of taking care of yourself.
Right, like going to the doctor for a checkup.
Exactly.
And, that could lead to some interesting changes, like maybe we'll see more identity labels that include mental health experiences.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, like instead of just saying, I'm a student or I'm an artist, someone might say, I'm a student living with anxiety, or I'm an artist who embraces my neurodiversity.
So it becomes part of how they describe themselves.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, it could be a way for people to really own their experiences, connect with others who get it, and advocate for more understanding and support.
It's like creating a new language for talking about mental health.
Right, one that's more integrated into everyday life.
But do you think there could be any downsides to that? Like, could people feel pressure to label themselves or feel limited by those labels?
Yeah, that's definitely a valid concern. It's important to make sure these labels are empowering and not limiting.
Right.
The goal should be to encourage self-awareness and acceptance, not to create new categories or divisions.
Yeah, because labels can be helpful, but they can also be misused.
Exactly. And that's why these conversations about mental health are so important. We need to keep talking, keep learning, and keep evolving our understanding of all of this.
So, to our listener out there, here's something to think about. As mental health continues to change and become more part of who we are, what role will you play in shaping that future?
Yeah, how will you bring these conversations into your own life and your community?
That's a great question for all of us to consider.
It is, because we have this amazing opportunity to create a world where mental health is understood and valued, and everyone feels empowered to get the help they need and live a full life.
That's a powerful vision, and I think it's something we should all be working towards.
Absolutely.
And with that, we've reached the end of our deep dive into this fascinating topic.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
We hope you found it insightful and thought-provoking, and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
We'll see you in the next deep dive.
See you then.